DeafBlind Victorians, 23 minutes. In black and white, a word roughly carved onto a grey surface slowly comes into focus. Identity. A woman with long hair laughs and smiles as she talks to someone else in Auslan, their hands touching. More of the carved surface, the words, hands, my identity, and images of hands touching. Heather, voice of tactile interpreter.
I'm a deaf-blind person and I want to be enjoyed. I want to be in the community just the same as everybody else.
A woman with shoulder-length hair and dark glasses. Michelle.
Even if there was 100,000 people around us here now, I would still feel, without an interpreter, really, really lonely. I would only feel like one person in the room. With an interpreter, or someone who can explain what's happening, that really is something that helps us to come up to the level of breaking that, as Heather said before, isolation.
The word isolation carved on a surface. Trudy, a blonde woman with thick glasses.
When I was first diagnosed with deaf blindness, I grew up in a hearing world, even though I'm deaf. And when I came against the other deaf-blind people, I came across isolation, communication barriers and confusion. And I found that everyone was at different wavelengths, and I found myself getting angry a lot, frustrated.
Frustration, scrawled white letters on a black surface.
When I first lost a great deal of my hearing about 22 years ago, I was just absolutely devastated. Communication was difficult. But when, I think one thing that I find really hard is that, okay, we all can talk and sign and what have you. When we all sort of go about our own life, and I wouldn't have it any other way, live in the real world or the true world, people just sort of think because you don't understand, you're absolutely, you're dumb or stupid. We're not dumb or stupid. We just have a different way of communicating. Even, like I find, even my family still doesn't really sort of communicate all that well.
Change. Distressed yellow letters on a surface riddled with holes and tears. Voice of tactile interpreter.
I know it's not easy, but I wish we could just achieve these things as of tomorrow. But I think a big change would be people's attitudes. Because a lot of people aren't aware of deaf blindness.
As she signs, an interpreter touches her hands for a moment.
Empathy. It's a really important word. Is that the word?
Yep.
The interpreter confirms it.
And in a way, like understanding, to be empathetic, I'd rather that than pity. So people, they need to understand that we're deaf and blind and we do need support, but we don't want pity. We have our own rights. We have the right to be involved in the community and everything, so that'd be a big thing I'd like to change. I think that's understanding and changing people's attitudes. We're forever providing advice and information, and I guess in a way I feel like a full-time teacher almost. I guess teachers, they teach for 10 hours a day, but I feel for me I'm constantly telling the same information over and over again, so there's been no change yet. It's really hard. It's not that easy. Oh, sorry, one more. I would like to change. I want more and more and more people with Auslan skills.
To sign more and more and more, she repeatedly draws her curled fingers away from her chest. Words carved onto a surface. Auslan, communication. Gold letters on the ripped surface. Tact, tiles. A carving workshop.
For about A3, a bit bigger than A3. They're made of clay. Able to carve into the clay. Some of the tools have double ends.
The deafblind participants sit across from interpreters who help them explore a range of carving tools and a small piece of flat clay in front of them.
We also have the wooden tool.
An interpreter signs what the workshop leader said, then places the tool in Heather's hand.
We then have the double-ended carving tool.
An interpreter signs to Michelle, then places the tool in her hands. Michelle feels both ends.
Let's have a play at making some different marks.
Michelle's interpreter signs the instructions, then guides Michelle's hands to her practice piece of clay. Michelle places a tool against its surface.
Don't be afraid to push.
Heather feels the blade of one of her tools, then Trudy turns one around and around, making a hole on her practice clay. She grins.
Before we get started, let's maybe ask what you're thinking about what you might put onto your tile.
I'm still working out how the carving process is working, what are the different shapes and things I can make first.
Heather signs, good.
Oh, I've made a hand shape and that's really good. I think I prefer one with the wooden handle better.
Something in my mind, like the finger and the...
Michelle winds her finger round and round. Michelle looks thoughtful.
Like I drew it before on the piece of paper.
Heather's just asked. It doesn't matter? It doesn't matter. Oh, okay, great. So we can all be different or...
Yep.
Oh, great.
I've sort of drawn a butterfly and a bat to represent DeafBlind, a fence, barriers, isolation.
Try and think about the marks that you make and actually how they reflect the emotion that you're feeling.
Michelle lays her hand against her clay tile, then uses one of the tools to trace around the fingers. Remnants from the carving. Trudy's carving a fence across the top of her tile. Heather thoughtfully scratches her chin before moving a carving tool around her tile. She explores the space available to her, then starts to trace around her fingers. Heather's freckled hands up close as she carves an outline of her hand into the tile, feeling with her fingers as she goes. She's wearing a watch on her left wrist and a peach-coloured top. Michelle's hands gouging crude letters out of the clay. Michelle runs her fingers over the marks she's made and brushes away the bits that have been carved out. Her hands and the tool cast shadows on the tile as she works. She uses her fingers to feel the carving. Michelle continues to carve her artwork and run her fingers over the clay surface. Trudy has made 4 tiny holes at each join in her fence. She runs her fingers over her carving. Michelle brushes away carving remnants from a shape she's made in her tile, then runs her fingers over the shape. She brushes away more pieces of clay.
What I suppose I'm sort of representing is things doing again and again and again, where without power, things just don't change. So this is representing for never, never, never. And if we don't have the power to change things, it'll continue be going the same forever, never, never.
Okay, so the reason why I'd drawn the dog today was as I was growing up before I lost my sight, I could always do lots of artwork at home. I would trace or copy work from other pictures. But when I lost my vision, I was really disappointed. I was really sad that I couldn't keep drawing. I did try a few times with pencils. I would always put the eyes on first and then put one of my fingers over one eye, then another finger over the other eye, trace around that way, so I always knew where my ink was on the page. But then I'd sort of stop doing it. It was something I'd do if I was just bored or at home, and like I could always draw almost anything. But then today, after I made my first piece with my hands over other hands, I thought, oh yeah, I'd never thought that all the drawing that I'd done years ago back when I was at school, I could try to draw the dog again. And my memory still was perfect from then, and I could draw it again, and the clay was so much easier for me being tactile. I could feel where I'd gone. Really, hands over the hands, the tactile, it's more involved with being in the deafblind community. So to be involved, we need interpreters. And so just having the picture of hands over hands is a way of tactile communication, just linking to touch. Sometimes when you meet people in the hearing world, you need to shake hands. And that's the thing for both communities, we're always holding each other's hands or touching hands. One thing for me here today, I can't see anything. Everything's completely black. Over the past couple of years, my eyesight had deteriorated further. So right now, like I don't know where I'm standing, I don't know the environment, it's all black to me. But by touch, I can put my hand out and feel, oh, the interpreter's right there. I know where I am. Through touch, I can put my hand to the side and find, oh, there's a chair there. There's the table. And that's the same as perhaps when I meet other deaf or deafblind people, we can put our hands over each other and communicate, and it all comes back to touch.
When I was first diagnosed with deaf blindness a few years ago, this is what I felt. This is me standing behind a fence, a wall, and there's a group of people here, and I just felt completely isolated from the community. And of course, it represents communication for deaf-blind people because they need to use all different forms of communication, such as Auslan.
That theme of ever is I'm bringing in the different ways of communicating. So you've got Braille, E-V-E-R, you've got it written E-R, and you have in the sign. So all the different ways of communication is brought together in one piece.
The words, "My joy," carved into a tile. A loopy line runs beneath it.
Having people around me that accept me gives me great joy, like you guys and, other people when we go to deafblind camps and things like that. Having the appropriate support when I go out with my support worker, we go shopping. Usually we can't go past a coffee shop without having a coffee and a chat. I absolutely love that.
A joy to me achieving something like the Philippines and getting into people's heads, like the government, about what deafblindness is. Breaking down the barriers, dance away to freedom.
My joy is playing jokes. I love jokes. I love making up tricks and jokes with my cane. I'm always very proud when people laugh at me. I feel good. any activity with a support or a friend when we go and do something. An example is I love to learn outdoor things. For instance, in New South Wales,
I went swimming and I got to meet some manta rays.
and I hugged it. So that was joy. It's very odd, but joy means for me learning, understanding something other than not just wondering what people are talking about, but understanding for me is joy, is real happiness. All the different fish I was able to touch in that aquarium, an octopus, I felt really, really happy and a lot of joy. So joy means from learning, having the knowledge and achieving something. Like when the three of us met the Prime Minister, Julia Gillard, I felt really positive and happy after that. That was joy for me.
Frustration. A mass of tangled lines.
Biggest frustration is with the government. They change their mind, they change the policies, and what we really want never happens anyway. Now we've got this NDIS happening and the government's still making decisions, and we still have to start all over again advocating for the deafblind. Just feels like we do all this advocacy but nothing gets achieved for us. And I get depressed about that. I feel frustrated with myself about how I can fix it for all other deafblind people. The government really makes me frustrated. Also, the other thing I get frustrated with is having enough people to communicate in Auslan. If there was more Auslan and more deaf people who would volunteer, there would be more support for deafblind. That's a big frustration, communication in Auslan. There's no communication with just the average person or the person we come in contact with in life. I get very frustrated with that.
I get frustrated with the government that they need to look at deaf-blindness as a whole, at all levels, not just at one level, because there's different types of deaf-blindness.
How people really don't understand the communication. When we have the communication interpreters and what have you, we're on the same level as hearing people. That sort of brings us up to the level. So I think I have to agree with other things that people are saying is about communication. What is going to happen to us, even DBV and advocacy in the future? Okay, fine, there will be hopefully changes and improvements made for NDIS, but however, I'm just gravely concerned that our voices are going to be, they're just going to stand on us or suppress us, because we are a small group and we really don't have that much power. And I sort of feel that that's sort of a frustration that I actually feel. There are also barriers that people put in our way that can't be seen. Institutionalised barriers that's put up, I think is absolutely appalling, and that makes me so frustrated.
It comes down to
It's going to come down to that one thing that government don't want to hear. So that's providing enough support for us and also new deafblind people coming into the group. So I suppose that that would be money. More deafblind people having the same opportunities as us, so that they too can learn about advocacy.
Hear the truth about deafblindness.
To me, DBV is
Together, one belief.
Bonding, power,
Heather Symes,
understanding, learning from each other.
Michelle, Heather and Trudy are sitting in a row, their tiles in front of their legs.
Okay, we ready?
Heather signs.
Joy for me is hands, touching hands. That's my identity, because hands are forever for a deafblind person. Tactile signing for deafblind people. We will always need hands for touching communication. With interpreters, that's how we communicate. That's what my tile means. And for me, joy is my identity with hands.
I'm talking about isolation and deafblindness in my picture because there in deafblindness there is isolation from the community, people, and they need communication such as Auslan.
E-V-E-R, ever. And if we don't change the situation, things will continue forever and ever and ever.
DeafBlind Victorians, DBV. DBV is run for and by people with deafblindness. Our community is one of the most marginalised. We want to be included in society. Our dreams are the same as everyone else. DBV lobby and advise governments for better services and raise community awareness of the barriers faced by people with deafblindness. DBV offered DeafBlind World training and workshops for staff, students and the community. DeafBlindAdvocacy@gmail.com. Produced as part of the Dangerous Deeds Project. Project partners: SARU, Diversity and Disability, Start Community Arts, Australia Council for the Arts, Creative Victoria. The completed artworks: Heather's touching hands, Michelle's finger making loops in the air, Trudy's fence with the mass of tangled lines, and her wall with someone from the deafblind world on one side and everyone else on the other.